Georgie? What a nice boat. Do you want it back?
Yes, please.
You look like a nice boy. Do you want a balloon too, Georgie?
I'm not supposed to take stuff from strangers.
Oh, well, I'm Pennywise the dancing clown. Now we aren't strangers, are we?
I should get going now.
Oh, without your boat? Here. Take it.
The only thing we have to fear is fear itself.
No. Be afraid. Be very afraid.
There's nothing to fear except God. Whatever that means to you.
Do I look like someone who cares what God thinks? Why do I say this? Because we got Holy Ghost power!
You're listening to The Fear of God, a podcast exploring the intersection between Christianity and the horror genre.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode of The Fear of God. Not just another episode, but a very special episode for many reasons. This is one of your hosts, Nathan Rouse. Typically with me is Reed, but today Reed said something about needing to just make a paper boat to see if it floats. I don't really know exactly what that is a reference to, but in the meantime, I want to welcome everyone to this very special episode. So many special things are happening. First of all, it is our second ever Quarterly King. If you have listened long to this podcast or just to 10 seconds of one episode, you might know that we have a deep and abiding affection for the one and only Stephen King and honor his work twice a year or every 25 or so podcast episodes. If you're a super nerd and accuse us of being fuzzy with the numbers here, we were planning to do Dark Tower for the Quarterly King, but did you see Dark Tower? Right. So here we are now with an overstuffed anniversary issue of an episode we call Quarterly King. On top of that, not only is this an oversized issue of an episode, but to make it even more special and collectible, it's got a variant holographic foil cover. Just kidding. But what it does have is a crossover. So many comic nerd deep cuts going on here this week. But it is true. This week we are teaming up. Well, first, like any good crossover, we may have already started fighting over some mutual understanding, and then we'll team up. But today we are teaming up with the crew from fellow Faith and Fear podcast, The Body and the Blood. Welcome, guys.
Yeah.
Yes,
How's it going?
yes.
Hello, everyone.
All right. So guys, to fill y'all in while we wait on Reed, this is a very special episode for us. Reed and I, in prepping for this overstuffed Quarterly King, we wanted to assemble our very own Losers Club. In hopes of defeating that frolicking ancient evil, one Mr. Robert Gray, a.k.a. Pennywise the Dancing Clown. So we invited you guys, or you might have invited us, depending on if you're listening to this in y'all's feed or in our feed or whoever. Welcome to all of the shows.
The turtle summoned us.
Yes. Oh, that was good. I should let you talk more. But before we dole out who is in our Losers Club, I'm going to assign some roles here. But I wanted you guys and The Body and the Blood to give you a chance to introduce yourselves, tell a little bit about your show, because people who are listening to this on the Fear of God feed will be totally mind blown by what is happening right now. So I wanted to give y'all a minute or two to do that. Hopefully Reed will return from his boat floating excursion soon. So take it away, guys.
So I'm Blake Collier. I'm the host of The Body of the Blood, and I'm the one who tries to corral Ian and Andy most episodes, and then I produce it afterwards, and it's fun most of the time, except for all the cussing and all the jokes that I have to cut out eventually. But we have fun over at The Body of the Blood. We pair a new horror film that has come out the year that we record and pair it with an older film that has a similar theme or similar idea that kind of connects the two because, like the Next Picture Show says, films don't happen in a vacuum. So, and we believe that's the case with horror as well. And so that's the basis of our podcast, and we are glad to be summoned to this Losers Club. I'll let Ian and Andy talk about themselves.
Okay, since he named me first, I'm Ian, and I've been doing By the Blood with Blake for a few years now. We definitely take the sacramentality of the viscera of horror very seriously, but the risk in any kind of like cultural criticism that's theologically informed is that it like takes itself too seriously and can be just so dire and everything. So we definitely try to keep the humor flowing plentifully at the same time. I don't think that jeopardizes how we try to meaningfully analyze what horror has to offer. We try to see through every facet of reality, and sometimes some stuff is just so absurd you have to laugh, or you'll go like Lovecraftian insane before it. So, and Andrew over here is the new kid in town, and he has definitely done a lot to make the show more accessible to the everyman or something.
I think you should let Andy explain that part.
I was going to say, does Andy not speak? It's gonna. I mean, it might be helpful for our productivity if he doesn't say anything, but we do want to include him.
Andy, don't screw it up.
Right.
You.
Okay. You're right, Andy.
I'm the everyman.
Nailed it. Yes.
Nailed it. Okay, go ahead. Go ahead. Just move on.
I'm here to corral Blake and Ian because they get too heavy with their theological discussions, and I bring it back to everyone. And
like an everyman.
Yeah, and I'm usually the fresh eyes of the podcast because some of the older movies I haven't seen, so I'm able to look at it through a different lens than Blake and Ian, because like The Thing I had never seen and I don't like, and I have to mention that every episode to make Blake and Ian upset. But I'd never seen it and I didn't like it, so that's what you get.
It's pretty intense. So
yeah.
Well, awesome. Well, thank you guys. So one, I think it's really cool the nature of y'all's podcast, the nature of ours. There's a very symbiotic sort of thing going on there, so it really makes sense that we're all losers together. Also, I did want to, before we get too far, before we float too far down the river here, make a point for listeners to note. So, very interestingly, all five of us are in different geographies in the U.S. right now: South Carolina, Illinois, Texas, California, North Carolina. So it's a very cool conglomeration getting together here. So thank you guys.
Losers across the land. Yeah.
Yes, losers across the land. I dig it. So it's great to be partnering with y'all on this Quarterly King. So Reed's still not back, but while we wait on him...
maybe you should introduce yourself for our podcast.
Well, thank you. That's a good idea. Yes, I like that. So yes, this is Nathan Rouse. So I sort of started, and maybe in many ways am still the everyman of our podcast, because Reed had a much more encyclopedic awareness and history with a lot of the horror movies we discuss. Probably about 50% of them I've seen, but he invited me on this journey about a year ago, and we are actually celebrating September-ish or late August. He can correct me if or when he gets back. Was about a year for us, so it's been a fun journey on our end as well.
Right on.
Thank you for having us as part of y'all's Losers Club as well. So I want to have some fun here and just dole out some roles of who's who in our Losers Club. So I'm going to bite the bullet and go first. And for me, I'm going to and I'm going to give y'all some roles too. So that's how it's going to work. I'm going to pick Ben. Not just because in the book he turns into a really handsome adult, but because, true story, my brother's nickname for me as an adolescent was Fat Boy, and so he's a jackass. And no,
how charming.
that is That is a true story, and lots of therapy to go along with it. But so I feel Ben's pain, so I'm right there with you, brother, big brother, little big brother. So Blake, moving on. I hear you, Blake, have a thing for your mom still, so you can be Eddie, okay? So you get to be Eddie.
Man, how does he know?
You just got to do a little digging.
That's really spot on.
Eerie, just eerie.
That Equifax breach. There's a whole lot of information flying around out there. Ian, I understand you have got a potty mouth that can't be beat, so you get to be old beep Richie, okay? And Andy, for you, a little clown told me that you always get the girl, so you get to be Bill in our little losers club here.
What I was
hoping to be Beverly.
Well, no, I was going to say, speaking of the girl, I mean, we do have to give out Reed, you're back! You are just in time for your part in the losers club, Reed. You get to be Beverly. How do you feel about that?
At least I got all the looks.
There you go.
But don't try to kiss me at the end.
Oh man! As long as this podcast does not go for Beverly the way the end of the book goes for Beverly, I'm okay.
Whoa!
I'm okay.
My goodness!
Hey,
wow!
You really had to bring that up, didn't you?
My co-host chose to make me Beverly. That's what's gonna happen. That's what's gonna happen.
Not in the movie. It's not going to happen. You just spoiled well, you didn't directly spoil it. Well, you just jumped in the sewer.
But at least we're not lost anymore, and we're all together.
Uh-huh.
Oh my God. The Losers Club just took a turn for the sour.
Hi everybody.
Hey, welcome, Reed. Welcome.
Thank you
to your show.
And for the record, I am also glad of everybody who's here and all that they are saying. And yes.
Yeah, I was going to say, I don't know if you know, we were doing this big crossover podcast. I didn't get a chance to give you a heads up on that.
No, I'm glad. I just showed up.
You're the Spider-Man.
Yeah, I just showed up, walked into the room, and everybody's here. Yeah,
under ruse.
Under ruse, exactly. And not only because of my chosen attire for our recording session today,
which is in fact under ruse, right?
Are you Superman?
Yes.
So I've got a question for everybody before we kind of go too far down the drain with Reed's reference there. So if Pennywise the clown were to appear to you as something other than a clown, what would it be? Just to contextualize that, if you've not read the book, it goes more in depth in the book as to exactly how this happens, but Pennywise manifests as things the characters are actually afraid of, and that's very clearly, as opposed to just a scary thing, which the movie sort of seems to be more about. So, if Pennywise were to appear to you as something other than a clown, what would it be? Anybody? Okay, Blake.
I'll go first. I'll say that probably the thing he would have to do to me to really freak me out would be to basically make me think I'm in a wide open space in the middle of the night, because I have a fear of wide open spaces in the middle of the night.
How would that work?
That is so weird.
Because anything can come from any direction at me.
It could.
A field? Or like a room?
Like, literally.
You just stay inside a piece of all the time?
No, it's not like it's not that bad. Like, it's at night, so like I'm driving home from a movie from Amarillo. I've got a 15-mile drive, and sometimes I'll take one of these roads that doesn't have much light.
Right.
Like it has street lights occasionally.
Well, I did just watch Texas Chainsaw Massacre, so I know where this could go.
This is true. Yeah. So it's more about like being on a road, and Amarillo is flat, so you can see the back of your own head if you look hard enough. That's how flat it is. And so it's just wide open space in the middle of the night, driving down a road. Literally anything could pop up on the road. That freaks me out.
All right. I can get down with that.
So he would have to do that. Like, he would have to find me in a place where I'm driving down the road, and he would have to pop out at the last minute and creep me out. Yeah.
All right. Who's next?
Existential, dude.
This is very existential.
I'll go next. I'll go next. So I think there's any variety of things that he could appear to terrify me, but I think he would have to appear to me at night, like in a dark room.
In a field? What is wrong with you?
Not in a field. But there's a specific thing that I have to prep myself for whenever the lights are all off in my house and I move from one room to the next. And I usually look over in the corner. I look over in the corner and say, like, okay, what is that small little hulking thing? It's probably some toy of my son's, but it's like, what is that small little hulking thing over here? And I have a continual nightly fear that one night I'm going to walk out there and that small hulking thing, whatever it is going to move and is going to move towards me. So if that's how Pennywise would really get me, is just like, oh, the lights are off, so I'm just going to pretend to be some bulk of something, bulk of fabric, bulk of whatever, some mound, and then I'm just going to start moving towards him. So yeah, that's what he would have to do.
This is a really interesting direction this question has gone. So Ian and Andy, y'all pick it up. Who wants to go?
I got it. Giant squid.
Okay, there you go. There you go. That's very direct. Very direct and succinct. I appreciate it.
Yep. No neuroses here. Just.
Hey, Reed, watch out for that lump of clothes in the corner there. Okay.
Listen, I have very specific fears. Okay, that's how it goes.
That sounds like it.
Mine would be a big snake.
Okay.
Oh yeah, can I change my answer?
I don't know. Are you going to say a big snake also?
In light of Andy's?
No. But the snake thing reminded me. Big freaking scorpion coming for me. Yeah.
Oh, see, yeah,
giant scorpion. Yeah.
That's
more terrifying than some. I'll hug the mound in the corner to get away from the giant scorpion.
That's part of his plan.
Blake, are you going to change your answer?
No, I refuse to.
All right, good.
Existential dread is often more scary than literal anyway, so I'm with you there. For myself, as I was pondering what this would be for me, honestly, it's a little synonymous with the movie itself. A giant spider would scare me to death. Like, I hate spiders. There is something about that sort of imagery. Clearly, if you've only seen this film as opposed to read the book or seen the miniseries, you might not know where this goes, but a giant spider plays heavily into where the whole thing goes. So it would either be that or a jellyfish, because I am the person who invariably, when we go to the beach, I will get stung by a jellyfish. So they clearly hate me and have it out for me.
Do you always get peed on?
Unrelated to the jellyfish, but yes, it's just a habit. Yeah, it's a thing. Damn you, Equifax. You're just leaking all of our information.
Andrew just has these really random insights that are he's good.
You could just tell. All right, so that's how Pennywise would scare me, is just to pee on me, I guess. I don't know how this edit is going to go, but it's going to. This welcome to the Quarterly King number 2.
Right.
All right. So let's talk a little bit about the movie itself. So for you Body and the Blood guys and Body and the Blood listeners, we do this Quarterly King. We were planning to do Dark Tower, but not even to be jokey. I went to see Dark Tower. I don't know who else did, but
I was going to say, and then you saw it.
Yes. No. Yeah. I saw it and then decided it's now if it had not been so close behind Dark Tower, we might have maybe just pulled the trigger, no Roland pun intended, and gone for it. But it really is not a strong movie at all, and barely works as a movie. So it was fortunate that it was so close behind it. So, and also what Reed doesn't know is that the survey he threw up, I got my wife to vote, and I voted to tip the scales in favor of it. So that's why we're all. That's why we're all
Everything I believed is a lie. Everything I believed is a lie.
Yes.
I can't trust anything.
So go around and say what you've like. Have you read the book? Have you watched the miniseries? Have you seen the movie? Have you done all three? For myself, I did read the book last year, and then watched the film. So I've seen bits and pieces of the miniseries, but not in its entirety.
I'm reading the book currently, and I'm on page 347. And I remember seeing the miniseries when I was younger, and I have seen the movie that just came out.
Okay, cool.
Well, thank you for that.
You're
Yes.
I'm glad that you saw the movie that came out.
He was just going to wing it if he didn't.
You really would just be that everyman who's just like, no, didn't see it.
You're right.
I'm just here for the popcorn.
His only comment is just continually, "How about that clown, y'all? How about that clown?"
Blake, have you? What's your experience?
So I saw the miniseries at some point in my young life, probably around the time it came out, maybe a couple of years afterwards. And then I watched it not too long ago, probably 3 or 4 years ago again. And man, it does not age very well. I read the book in college, and I loved the book until the end, and then it made me want to burn the book.
Now, when you say that, so this is going to be just a free-flowing spot of the conversation. When you say that, are you referring to the sewer scene or the astral plane, or all of it? What are you referring to?
Pretty much from the scene that Reed spoke of
right.
to the end. I hate.
Okay. Yeah,
that whole and really like the ritual, quote unquote, that takes place. Like it doesn't bother me in any kind of way, but it's just it doesn't feel like it fits with the rest of the story, and so like from that point on, I just kind of lose interest. So and then
okay, yeah, and we may come back to some of those scenes in specific. Ian, what about you?
I read the novel when I was in 3rd grade.
Are you serious?
Because
my man.
Yeah, because 1993 and 1994 was a weird year for me.
You and Reed would get along.
Ian, why are we not friends? We have to be friends.
Tonight is the night.
All right, let the ritual ensue.
you are Beverly, so
oh my god.
Let's
spoiler alert.
My heart burns there too.
Oh my gosh. All right, so Ian, so you read the book in 3rd grade like an idiot. And are your parents alive? Are they okay? Did they let you read it?
They were somewhere.
So you think Ian's an orphan because he read the book in 3rd grade?
No, I just meant, was there a parental authority who said, this is probably not a good...
I should have put something in the notes beforehand about being an orphan and it being touchy. It's fine, you didn't know. Yeah. My butler raised me, so that year I read Stephen King's published corpus to date. So I read it, and because that was the era when if I did a grocery store run for my mom, I got to buy a book from the rack. So I would just get I had read all of Michael Crichton. I read all of Stephen King that year. So yeah, I read it. And
Michael Crichton, is he Jurassic Park?
Yes,
that's right.
He is Jurassic Park.
Okay. You are an everyman, aren't you?
Ian Malcolm, he's cool, real cool. And so around the same time, I saw the miniseries because other 3rd graders didn't read, and they're like, "Oh man, there's a clown and it's scary." And I was like, "That's Tim Curry. He's the devil. Awesome!" And I rewatched it recently, and holy cow, that sucks. When your cast is John Boy and the guy from Night Court, that's not a good move.
Both references no one will get.
Oh, man.
Unless they're our age.
I get them.
Okay, well,
no. No, I'm talking about our audience. Unless they're our age or older.
What's up, 40-year-old audience? So,
Night Court.
Just Wikipedia, kids. Yeah.
All right.
Dang it.
Wow.
So then I watched the movie, and now there's 3 It's in my mind that I'm kind of toggling between anytime we talk about it.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right, Reed. Can you trump Ian? Did you watch it in 3rd grade?
No.
Or read it in 3rd grade?
No.
First grade.
Right. Actually, it was my primary in kindergarten, and so no. So I encountered it much later, but I was about 14 years old when I read it. But I did see the miniseries first because I watched the miniseries when it aired. So I saw the miniseries first. Miniseries was 90, and then I enjoyed it at the time, very much so. So I went back and read the book. Enjoyed the book much better, although I am with Blake and pretty much every sane individual about the ending. But so then I read that. I did later revisit the book and have a different appreciation for the astral metaphysics of the ending, and an even less appreciation for the sewer scene at the ending. The
ritual.
Yes, the ritual. So I've read the book twice. I've seen the miniseries probably a couple of times, most recently earlier this evening, actually.
Wow.
And so I rewatched the miniseries, and yeah, I have to agree with everybody. At this point, it's just nostalgia. At this point, like anything that I enjoy about it is purely my memories of seeing it when I was much younger.
Is it at least a solid adaptation?
I mean, as an adaptation, it's pretty good at hitting the highlights of the book. It changes some necessary things, but if you're looking at just a palatable, made-for-TV, we're going to give you the book story in condensed format in 3 hours, I would say it's a strong adaptation, but the limitations of TV, the limitations of effects at the time, the limitations of its adult cast, which is really weird for me to say because the kids are pretty strong.
Good. Yeah.
Yeah, the kids are pretty strong in it, but then the adult cast just sort of crumbles a bit in the second half, and I think that's what really hurts the film overall. But I found
does it go back and forth, or does it do kids and then adults?
It goes back and forth. Yeah. Okay. I mean, the first half is most of the young stuff, but it does go back and forth continually through the 3 hours.
The way it should be.
Yes,
right.
Exactly.
I second that.
Yeah, exactly. But I did. We like. I mean, we'll get into a lot of the specifics about the 2017 film, but I was very fond of this, and I feel like now that this is in place, there's going to be less and less reason to revisit that 1990 miniseries for me. Which makes me a little sad to say, but I'm glad that this new film is here. I'm hopeful for Chapter 2, et cetera, et cetera.
I still appreciate Tim Curry.
His performance is great. Yeah,
I still
his
appreciate what
performance
he
is
brought
great
to the role, but that's about the only reason why you'd want to watch it.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. Exactly.
Well, our typical format, and we can sort of go through some of this, is once we go back and forth on some of what we've been doing, we talk about the likes and dislikes associated with the particular piece we're discussing, and then we'll get into some scares and some thematic ideas. So really, if we want to just take the next few minutes and kind of round table just some likes, dislikes, piggyback off each other, I will start. I was so disappointed with Dark Tower. And I knew the Rotten Tomatoes going into it and was still pretty disheartened.
Yeah.
I had prepared my heart for it to be maybe less than. And while I do have some quibbles, I think overall the production design was really strong, infinitely better than Dark Tower. And specifically, the casting of Beverly, Eddie, Bill, and Richie was phenomenal. I mean, that's such an impressive feat to get a group of kids that strong. I don't think every kid is that strong, but those four in particular really, really make it work really well. So those are just two off the top of my list for likes. What else does everybody have?
I really like Pennywise.
Yeah,
he's great.
I thought he was just like fantastic, and from my reading of the book so recently, it kind of fit with what it was. I like that he wasn't as bright as Tim Curry. And he was dark, and it just Bill, what's his name? Bill Skarsgård, which just like was so fantastic. And I've read some about like how he got into the role and stuff like that, and he just really took it to another level for me. And I mean this Pennywise like really sticks with me.
Cool, yeah.
So I was basically just going to add on, yes, Bill Skarsgård was great in this. I think for someone trying to step into the shoes of Tim Curry, he took in a completely different direction, and I believe it worked in spades. I think probably the other thing I would mention is updating the timeline to the 80s.
Yeah, that was great.
Was a great addition. And it's just the nature of where we're at in our culture. We're kind of infatuated with the 80s again. Yep. And it makes sense to
I couldn't be happier.
So, yeah, no kidding. Me too. That's the age I grew up in. So, it's just all the references, all the meta-ness of of kind of what shows up in the movie, reference wise, is pretty great. The soundtrack is wonderful. And yeah, I really appreciated them trying to update it and kind of bring it into a realm that's similar in tone to like Stranger Things and things like that. So those were the two biggest lacks I had.
So let me go from there. That's a perfect segue for me, because while I agree that the casting was phenomenal, I guess I don't say that with like a starry-eyed kind of adulation. I think that it was a good move having like Finn Wolfhard, for instance.
Mm-hmm. Yes,
but because Stranger Things is it, and Poltergeist and Salem's Lot and E.T., the mirroring is it just almost felt like commentary. A little heavy-handed, because essentially it's like, hey, well, let's have Mike be Dustin this time, which that's not a very strong knock against it at all. I totally concede that. It's just that it's impossible to not have that perspective, I think, if you've seen Stranger Things. When you know that it's heavily indebted to more than just like a certain genre, a specific period of like horror and science fiction.
Well, you know, the Stranger Things creators were in the running to be like its directors at early stages in 2015.
Oh wow, I didn't know that either. That's interesting.
And in fact, I believe that because I was just doing some reading on this today. You know, the top level production director and even screenwriter, there was a turnover more than once. But Finn Wolfhard was the only cast member to make it kind of the whole way.
Wow.
And I think, I think you make a good point. It's almost unfortunate that they exist kind of within just a couple of years of each other, and they're 80s set, and it's Finn Wolfhard, who's great in both.
Yeah.
But I understand what you're saying. Like, it's kind of hard to shake. Okay, well, it does feel a lot like that other thing.
And especially when it's like, well, we won't typecast him. We'll just remix it as a different kid from Stranger Things. But again, that's not very strong. It's just I couldn't help it but notice it. But things that I liked, because I do like that it evokes some of that. I love Stranger Things, and it's even funny to say that because it obviously precedes it. As an influence, and yet here we are talking about a 2017 movie that has, cast from an homage to the original It. So, what I really found strong was, at first I questioned the whole premise of having everything from the past in a single film, and then we'll cover everything, quote unquote contemporaneous in the second film. But what I found myself liking was that this allowed a lot more exposition, not in a heavy-handed like narrator telling you everything way. I mean in just being in Bill's world longer and getting to know him through seeing his actions, getting characterization through embodied action. And I think part of the payoff was that I found it immensely heartbreaking just seeing so in the 1990 miniseries we see George for all of 3 minutes. We know that it's Bill's younger brother, and that's it, and they're a little antagonistic even, whereas in this we have 10 plus minutes of those two, and seeing I found this just wrenched my heart so hard. I have 2 kids. Seeing Bill George hugging his brother while Bill's making the newspaper boat, right? And seeing that play out so naturally, just like any 7-year-old boy does with his older brother, right? And just feeling genuine love between them. I think they captured the relationship very well without any cheesy dialogue. I love you a lot, bro, or anything like that. And just knowing what's going to happen. Like, I know he's going to meet Pennywise. This sweet boy is about to die. I'm about to watch it. And I I don't get very anxious during horror movies, but I was squirming in my seat knowing this kid is about to die, and just hating Pennywise immediately, just with a passion. So I think that having that very strong focus, spending a lot of time with each of these characters, establishing their time, their place, their practices, got us a lot more into who they are, rather than having, the Losers Club all meet each other and tell each other their biographies, and that's how we find out. Yeah. So I think that was strong.
Yeah, that's actually a really good segue to mine, unless you had more to say, because that I'm going to piggyback off that. But I want to. That was good. So what I was going to comment on is, whenever I think it's my theory, although I'm sure smarter people have said something similar before, because it's kind of overt. Most people, I think the reason that most Stephen King adaptations fail largely is because most directors or adapters focus on plot. And when they focus too heavily on plot, King's work, I won't say it falls apart, but it is severely detrimented, because the reason he is who he is because of his richly drawn characters and the relationships that they have. And that's what resonates through the large body of his work. So for me, the biggest deal is they got these relationships, like you were saying, Ian, they got these, and well, everybody's kind of said something along these lines, that just the casting was spot on. The tone was precisely what I thought it needed to be, with one small caveat I'll mention in a second. But I feel like they really honed in on, we need to believe and empathize and invest in the relationship between these Losers Club. We really need to buy into them, and if we buy into them, then the stakes will be what they need to be, the payoffs will be what they need to be. One thing you mentioned, Ian, about that relationship with Georgie, what a tremendous and gut-wrenching payoff to find his jacket in the sewer at the end.
Yes, absolutely.
And you feel every inch of that emotion. It's really devastating, and in a very effective way. One of the things that I love about it is I do feel like they give some time and some space to the quieter moments, the impact of the fact that Ben wrote the poem, and they tag in on that a few times, where Beverly's mind goes, and then with Ben's disappointment in it, but then quite a payoff for Ben, in the same thing. And we know, and readers of the book, and I think even viewers of the miniseries are going to remember that they eventually wind up together. Spoiler alert for people who haven't, whatever. But it's something that, like, I really appreciated and loved, that they got that tone so right. And one of I think my favorite moment in the film, speaking to that whole relational element, is Richie's big stand up and cheer triumph moment in the sewers, where he's like, "It's all your fault, Bill. You hit me. All this happened." And then when he grabs that bat and says, "Welcome to the Losers Club," I almost came out of my seat. I was like, this is what makes this story work. This exact thing is why this story resonates so profoundly. Nearly 30 years later, like that. That's why it's such a big deal. So that's my biggest, my one small caveat is I do feel like the book, and to a small degree, the 90 miniseries, does dread a little better than the 2017 film does. I feel like it relies a lot more on startles than it does dread, but that didn't bother me, because they got so many other things right. I was able to forgive that and bypass that, because I feel like so many other elements were so strong. And
I'm going to tag in quickly on that real fast. Whenever you were talking about the startles or the jump scares, I think that's actually the point where I started to realize that the creators of the film didn't actually trust Bill Skarsgård to carry his role. I feel like he had the ability. I think the parts where he's able to just be himself and not be real, not have reliance on CGI or jump scares. He was intense and creepy.
Oh, he's incredible. Yeah.
I don't think he needed all that. And I feel like that was just them both feeding into the nature of horror right now, but also they were afraid that because Tim Curry's such a massive figure, and he's got big shoes to fill, they were afraid that he was not going to quite fill, live up to that, and he can.
Yeah,
and
I
I
agree.
think they would have done better to take the risk and just let him be him throughout
So
the
they
movie.
were so I think, Blake, you're saying they were worried they'd get a Jared Leto Joker. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, exactly. Exactly.
They kind of hedge their bets a bit.
Yep.
I do want to. So those are all kind of would fall into the likes category. Something that, and please, I'm interested in some potential pushback here because it may have just been that so only seen the movie once kind of experience. So for me, I think that the reading of the book was so until the end, which even the astral plane stuff didn't bother me nearly as much as the ritual did, but the book is so scary to the point that when I first started to try to read the book for the first time, I've only read it once, but when I first tried to get into it, I would stupidly use it as like my go to bed, wind down reading, and which isn't inherently bad, except that at the time I was trying to do this, I would only give myself like 15, 20 minute sort of reading chunks as opposed to just big, okay, just go full in. Because what that ended up doing is that if you've read the book, the book starts with the story of the gay couple and the attack and the throwing the guy over the bridge and Pennywise's attack on him and the cops and all of this interrogation stuff. It's very terrifying. And if you break that up into tiny pieces, it's like really scary right before bed. So it took me a while to get moving. But what that did was reinforce for me something that I think the movie struggles with a little bit. And to your point, Ian, about splitting the narrative between the kids and ultimately the adults, I'm with you. I think that was almost a necessity. Like you have to, if they didn't know there's a second film, and it seems like that wasn't 100% certain, you've got to figure out how to do this in a way that doesn't destroy the story but still honors it. And so I do think they made the best possible choice. But my concern that happens, and this is where I'm saying please push back some, is I feel like splitting it created a really good first movie, but I'm worried you remove the intertwining of the narratives in the book creates this really interesting structure of the themes, right?
Yeah.
And so I think when you split that, you start to mess with what are the really strong themes. And this is where I'm going with the mild dislike here. Because to me, reading the book, I got the impression of Pennywise as a terrifying... What made him so scary to me was it felt like this personification of this town's animus and fear and anger and hatred. And that was that was terrifying. I was like, holy crap, King has done this, fantastic trick before us of embodying it in this kind of clown character. But what that clown character actually is the collective rage and anger and fear of a group of people, which has all sorts of thematic resonance. And so my concern with the movie, and I don't exactly know how you correct this, although I trust the creators enough to give them the opportunity to. My concern with the movie is Pennywise just feels like a big boss. He feels like the end of the level boss. He scares you a couple times in the movie, and then we're going to dispatch with him in a way that the book conveys so much more gravity and heft. And this may just be the nature of the problem of the medium going from a book to a movie. And I can totally respect that. But that was something I wrestled with. I felt like, oh, well, Pennywise is just the bad guy as opposed to this sort of rich ancient thing. So how about it? Who wants?
I want to chime in immediately because I completely agree with that. Because I'm happy with Pennywise being actually this cosmic entity that I wish that some adaptation of it would finally approach that, because that's what he is. But is to how do you sell that idea in any kind of limited time frame whatsoever? If you rush it, it will fall flat on its face and it will be nothing but laughs, just disdain. I would love if that could be done well, because that's what makes. I agree with you. Right now, he's just M. Bison, essentially.
Yes. Yoga Flame, yes. He is just M. Bison.
Yes. But he's the Raul Julia M. Bison.
That is a serious deep cut, but I got it.
I am so proud of everybody in this room right now.
We are truly losers, and this is our club.
Yes.
Can we, maybe let the fans know who Tim Vice is?
Nope.
Maybe let me know.
You gotta earn it.
So how about that clown?
And I think that if we actually portray Pennywise as a cosmic entity who is not simply scary but is horrifying because we get a glimpse into this is what reality is really like. It is profoundly anti, not just you individually, y'all. I think that blends in well with the structure of the novel and does give us I'm not usually a fan of trying to like tear apart the husk to get to the kernel that can be universally applied, but I mean it is about being a kid, having those significant moments that make you, right? And how do you remember them? And your memory of them is a further shaping of who you are. And part of the fear is, and the movie does this a little implicitly, but I was asking Blake, like, do you think this is going to become explicit? Like, part of the premise of it is that the curse on the town makes adults, like, they ignore what's going on. They profoundly sink everything that is so obviously heinous and evil deep into their subconscious, I guess, which, that is an interesting statement about becoming a grown-up. Because we all know, like, there's not actually something scary out there. It's just the heap of clothes. Eventually you grow up and you realize, okay, it's not a frightening thing. It's just this. It's a heap of something in the dark. And usually we see that as good, right? That's progress towards maturity. In that case, it is. But as we all know, there's always that fear that a kid has of like, man, I stopped like caring about stuff. I stopped feeling things. I stopped giving a rip once I become a grown up because now I'm supposed to care about this stuff that really, if anyone was sane, they wouldn't care about their job. Like, how boring. So part of the fear of it is like, God, I don't want to grow up. It's kind of Peter Panish, right? Sure, I don't want to grow up to be as unfeeling as that. And it's significant that ultimately the Losers Club forget everything, right? They leave Derry and they forget.
Well, and also to piggyback on that, and please others jump in. I'm talking too much, but you're making me think. Someone, I think Blake, you referenced earlier Lovecraft. Like you can see where King is clearly creating this kind of Lovecraftian character in what is it, and so if you, and this is why I say when you split the story like this, which again I think is a necessity of the attempt this time. Like if you're making a feature film and you only got one chance, you can't do the whole thing. It's not going to work. Right. It's going to fail.
Unless you have the budget and the trust of like someone like Peter Jackson.
Sure. But what happens is you lose that theme, and the theme, as Ian, you were just talking, it just made me want to go reread the book, is that is our youthfulness, our imagination, our that essence of us is what will save us. Right?
Yeah.
I mean, because this Lovecraftian monster that has deadlights that will drive you insane, and the adults can just pretend it's not there, but the kids are the ones. Not only is it a burden that we are placing upon them. See, now I'm totally getting the themes, and we should just keep going.
No, don't. Yeah, have the conversation.
I mean, so no, that's interesting you say that, because I think we run the risk of making fear just a negative thing.
Right, yeah.
Fear has a positive element. Fear can keep people sharp. It can allow for us to be aware. And so part of why the book especially, and to some extent the movies work, is because when you lose the negative aspect of fear, to some extent you lose the positive aspect with it. And so you lose your awareness. You lose your ability to take into account that, yes, the boogeyman is still there.
Right.
It's not what we thought it was, but it's still there. And because we are not aware of it anymore, and we put away the we put away the toys of childhood, but we also end up putting away the truth of the toys. And so that's the problem, is that when they get older, 27 years later, they're coming back to Derry. They don't remember this stuff because they put away their toys and everything, all the baggage that goes with it. And so they're not aware. They're not sharp anymore. And then they're brought into a new world where Pennywise comes back. And the beauty of what I think the adult story can do is it can give Pennywise more ability to just be himself. Because if I remember the book correctly, he talks a lot more in the adult part.
Oh, yeah.
He's more trying to just scare people, scare the kids. Whereas the adult part, he's trading barbs.
He's very oppressive.
And they're sharp, and they're hurting them.
Yeah.
And so I think the second film has a possibility of being really clever.
Yeah.
In how they write the script and how they use him as, like, it's no longer about scaring them. It's about hurting them where it counts. And because they're so unaware, it gets past their defenses really
sure
easily.
And I think that one advantage that the sequel will have, and if it's smart, the sequel itself will hopefully not be compartmentalized to just the adult plot line. Is I think the sequel will now have to have tangible connective tissue to, you know, bringing the kids back, showing us more of that old part of the world. And I think that'll be a necessity to sort of connect these two timelines. And I think that what everybody's saying about Pennywise's oppressive power is, I think, part of what, well, and also, I mean, the book had 1,200 pages to do this, you know. The only thing worse than not liking it is dropping it on your foot.
And you're on,
you know?
what, 300, Andy? 300?
300, yeah.
Yeah. So
yeah, I'm getting there.
So yeah, I mean, it's one of those things where naturally the book has a lot more time, and I do think in many ways it is one of, if not King's definitive masterpiece, because it deals with so many things that show up elsewhere in his work, in his body of work. Like all the things we've mentioned, the power of memory, childhood and innocence and the loss of innocence, carrying your monsters into your adulthood, all of those kinds of things is what it is largely about. But I do think, I think this was Blake who said this, that like the oppressive power that Pennywise has when they're adults, and yeah, because he is being, when he's with the kids, he lures them in by kind of being playful and like, hey, come here, you know, so he frightens them, but not really until they get close enough for him to possibly catch them. But as adults, he doesn't care. As adults, he comes at them teeth bared. He's not trying to lure them anymore. Now he's like, and you really get this sense in the book of like, when they're adults, he's very much like giving them the finger, like, yeah, you thought you got rid of me, didn't you? Yeah, you'll never get rid of me. There's no way that you're ever going to escape me. And there's a power to that kind of, I mean, it naturally is demonic. It's very, it's a tactic of the enemy that things are always going to come back to the negative place. It's always going to come back to the bad thing. We can frame ourselves psychologically to think that the indomitable part of life is the negative part of life, and that the monsters are the ones who never go away, that good only triumphs temporarily, instead of seeing it the other way around. And I think that's part of the power of the adult storyline in it, is that it plays with that in a very direct, tangible way.
Yeah.
Before we, you know, we've already started cracking the book on some thematic ideas, which are all very rich and good. Let's do sort of a bullet roundtable of some scares. You know, this is a horror movie, and it is doing gangbusters at the box office right now. So inherent to that genre is going to be some scary stuff. So for time's sake, maybe for the moment, just limit to one or two. I think for me, I'll start with just one that was probably the most effective. I've got others, but the most effective scare in the movie to me was Pennywise showing up in the bathroom to attack Beverly after she attacks her dad. Because it was a scene not built on Pennywise, I was not prepared for him. And she has this real heroic moment of overtaking her father, and then all of a sudden he's there, and it made me jump 3 feet out of me. So that if I had to pick exactly one, that would be my one. Who else?
My scariest scene was at the butcher shop where he's behind the glass or the plastic and his head is tilted to the side.
Ooh.
And then he just comes at that guy.
Mike.
Yeah.
Is that
Mike.
where he's got the arm? Am I making
Yeah.
that?
Yep.
Oh.
Yeah. That was my scariest part.
I'll go ahead and say that scares are hard for me because I very seldom actually just get
Because
scared.
nobody was actually driving in the night in an open
Exactly.
field. And
Yeah,
you're like,
exactly.
This is not scary
That is-
at all.
There were zero fields.
No, I there's only one movie that has actually kept me awake at night. But that's for another podcast.
Wow. I want to know.
So
Paranormal Activity.
There are no fields in it either.
But I will say the most impressive moment, as far as I think this is impressive because I think this is one part where they got CGI right, and it could have gone horribly wrong. And this is the part where they're looking at the slideshow,
Yeah.
and the humongous Pennywise comes out of the screen. That shouldn't have worked on any level.
I agree with you.
But it worked really well, and I was like, that actually feels visceral and realistic, like the way they did that, and so it like I looked at that, and I was just like, I kind of sat back, and I was like, all right, I feel like I'm in good hands. Like,
Well, what's funny about that is I remember in the screening I was in, getting to that scene and thinking, oh, well, this is the trailer moment, so I'm kind of ready for this. And then I sort of like what you just described, that experience of it just keeps going. So whatever was in the trailer, they then added to and bulked up that scene, and then he comes out in this monstrous giant form. And I don't know, I was really impressed with that too.
Yeah.
So I would also say there weren't any scenes where I shrieked or anything like that. But what I found unnerving most was the slideshow, the image of Bill's mom that becomes Pennywise. So with the conceit of they've unplugged the projector, all that stuff, it's still going, and we're getting closer and closer up, zooming at into his mom's. Her hair's blowing in the wind, but then slowly realizing, shot after shot after shot after shot is Pennywise, and just waiting for the full reveal. I did find that agonizing, and I guess for me, maybe my own kind of kid in it moment. It reminded me of nightmares I would have when I was a kid of, those shows that would be on Friday nights about like aliens and ghosts and stuff like that, like sightings and stuff like that. Sometimes I would have a nightmare that aliens used to freak me out, okay? So
They still do, Ian. They still do.
I barely slept between 4th grade and 6th grade because I was so worried about alien abductions. So I'd have this recurring nightmare where it's some crappy like camcorder footage of like someone looking at a window when it's night, and then like a gray is gonna like poke his head in the window, And the nightmare is that I'm watching it and I know that the gray is gonna poke his head into the window, and I'm covering my eyes with my hands, but then I can see through my hands, and it's almost like as if the alien knows I'm watching and will make me watch despite my efforts to not see. So I guess it was just reminiscent of that.
That's pretty intense.
Yes. So then I just went into apoplectic shock and was wheeled out, and it was a great night.
I'm surprised you didn't earlier say that Pennywise would appear to you as an alien now.
Yeah,
I forgot.
Like an adult.
It's all coming. It's all coming back now. I'm such an inauthentic adult.
Reed, what about you, my friend?
So the biggest part for me that sort of stands out is like when I was the most tense, aside from several of the jump moments, was when the trio, Eddie, Richie, and Bill, first go into Neibolt's house. When they're all there and they start kind of getting parsed out. You know, Eddie gets separated out, and then Richie in the death room of clowns. Good Lord, help me.
Yeah, that was on my list, yeah.
And then all of the, you know, and then encountering the doors and the, you know, just what I really loved about that scene overall is that they really, it is one of those moments where I think they did start to dip their fingers into the dread territory, because it wasn't entirely based around them just startling you in moments that you didn't quite expect. There is a tension building up steadily as you're moving through that, you know, the horrors in that house, with a tremendous payoff when they first start to learn the nature of Pennywise, and like how, you know, if he's not believed in, if they're not afraid of him and all that stuff, and then Beverly jabbing him through the eye. You know, it was just a well constructed sequence, and that was probably my favorite moment of the film in terms of the fright factor. Second favorite moment of the film, you know, to the whole "Welcome to the Losers Club" moment for Richie. That was really up there for me. That whole first entrance into the Neibolt house. For me.
One honorable mention I wanted to throw out for scares was the whole Beverly's sink scene. I thought, even knowing it was coming, I was really just impressed with how hard they committed to that scene. It really is effective and disgusting, and you know, I mean, it just keeps going. It's just kind of this real, sort of like what you just described, Reed, about the Neibolt house scene. Predominantly, the movie leans into the jump scares. I feel like that scene would fall more in line with if there were just a couple more of these throughout it, or something like it, that just sort of built this dread kind of component. It might have landed a bit more in the really, really, really scary kind of category. As it was, that was just a really effective scene. What's more disgusting than hair in a sink?
Blah. Hair in the sink attacking you is what's more disgusting.
As a large, hairy dude, I can say there is not much scarier than that.
Sure.
Can I change my answer? Actually, I've been thinking about it. The bully, what's his name?
Henry, yeah. Henry Bowers.
His whole story, his whole thing is terribly frightening. I mean, you know, cutting Ben's stomach, running after him, like the fact that he like just kills his dad, and you know, just coming at him like that. That's scary, because it's like, I wasn't the most popular kid, but you know, there were those mean kids around who would just like shit on you.
Yeah.
And like, and he was that guy, and that's
probably in one of the deleted scenes is doing that.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, he was a true bully.
Yeah. Well, and that's one of those touch points of the book and the films, is that that's like the ultimate end of bullying. Like, that's, if you take it to its furthest extreme,
right?
Like, it's just murder. It's murder.
Yes.
It's a type of murder. And so yeah, that is terrifying for many reasons.
Yeah. I want us to start having a little bit of space to sort of talk about thematic things, but I did want to mention just very briefly one final sort of scare on the bullying note is we've mentioned it about the sort of the ineptitude of the adults in there, but these kids all have just horrendous home lives, with the exception of Bill. Like, they all just have situations in their home which is just, they feel so disenfranchised by the people who are supposed to be caring for them, nurturing them, guiding them, and they feel completely and utterly all on their own. And I think that's one of the things on a sort of a deeper, more underbelly level that's really frightening about the story in general, is that you do reach a point to where you're like, I'm young, I don't know what I'm doing, and I'm all alone. Like, yes, I'm with, you know, and this will actually kind of bleed into some of the things that I was gonna talk about in themes, but that's the other element of it, is the tremendous fear, and the fear that Pennywise literally feeds off of is by isolating them, by picking them off and getting them away from the group. And if he can make you feel alone, you are much more consumable. And if he can make you feel utterly that nobody is going to come to your rescue, nobody is going to be there for you, this is all up to you, that's a terrifying thought. And I know a lot of times kids and even getting into the teenage years, that's exactly what we struggle with, is that idea of like, wow, the world is just against me and nobody's got my back. Nobody's going to be there for me if I cry out for help. Nobody's going to be there if I try to reach out to anything. And that's sort of, systemic in dairy, but I also think that's systemic in life. Unless anybody else had any real burning scares, that might lead us into some of the thoughts for themes, if you want to dive there. I had one major theme that I'll go ahead and just bounce out because it bleeds off of what I was saying, and then we can banter that about, and then if anybody else has anything else, we'll round table it. But I do think that one of the things that stuck out to me the most about the Losers Club and why we love the Losers Club and why my favorite moment in the film is that moment when Richie is like, welcome to the Losers Club, and they start attacking Pennywise as a collective unit, is the sense of community. We've already talked about how what the film gets right is their relationship and the strength there, but I think that's really what's at the heart of the book in terms of a hope level is, these are the people who understand. These people surrounding you, they come from various different backgrounds, different creeds, different life stations, but these are the guys, like they're drawn together by sort of a almost spiritual connectedness that like, hey, we are alike in the world. Even though we have dramatic differences left and right, we are alike in the world, and they bond together as a cohesive unit, and that's what ultimately defeats the darkness, both in the child world and as adults, is their ability and capacity to come together. And that's something that I, as a person, always respond very strongly to whenever that's in a film, is this idea of, to quote Lost, live together, die alone. That's
Beat me to it.
So, but that's, that is something I've always, just as a person, responded to very deeply. The necessity of community, the strength of community, the power, and yes, the power in community to overcome the darkness that's driving in to threaten. So that's really sort of the period at my theme. I'd welcome thoughts or kickbacks or nuances or anything else.
Yeah, the beauty of that theme is that we've already talked about the systemic and the permeation of evil and sin in dairy.
Yeah.
The beauty of the nature of systemic evil and sin is that it cannot be overcome by one person. It has to be done in a community. Like there has to be even Jesus Christ who died on the cross and defeated death, he was still in the Trinity. Like he still was in a community. And so that's the beauty of the nature of the Trinity. And so,
this is why you should be in your small group at your church.
Exactly. Yeah. This is why you should be in accountability groups.
Yes.
Lengthy footnote.
So yeah, I think that's a nice tie-in to the fact that if you're going to confront evil's always systemic. Sin is always systemic. There is no such thing as private evil or private sin. And so you have to be in a community. Like there has to be you have to surround yourself in people that are of a like spirit and a like mind and a like heart in order to first recognize the evil or the sin and then to attack it.
Yeah.
And that's where the power comes to defeat those things is when you're of a like mind.
Yeah.
So
yeah, agreed. And I would even say on top of that too, you're striking in me the memory that it has always bothered me when we talk about like sin as a compartmentalized thing. Well, it's not my sin, or like I'm not as bad as that, or I haven't done this thing, or I haven't done that thing. And there's a blatant dismissal of our collective culpability in the sins of the world, that we are collectively culpable. Yes, I have not done the things that this other person has done, but the quality of sinfulness in the world around us, I am responsible for that. I am culpable for the contribution that I've made to that end. And unless I, in my theological understanding, unless I come to at least a baseline recognition of that, I have no chance against it. Unless I have a recognition of my own culpability in the sinfulness of the world, then I'm going to have no hope in accepting grace, accepting the redemptive nature of Christ's blood, and taking that into my own life. I've no hope for that, because I'm going to think like, well, I'm better than that. At least I'm better than that. So it's not my problem, and it's not mine to confront. And yeah, we could go on a rabbit trail with that. I'm not. I just wanted to mention that because it was sparking up in me.
Yeah.
So who else either has a response to something like that, or a comparative theme that they had? Ian, Andy, Nathan, any one of you?
I don't mind going. So yes, I do have "Live Together, Die Alone" written on my notes right in front of me. But
you made me, Beverly. I get to steal that. Okay, that's just how it works.
You can have it. It's we're all in this together, brother. Because if we can't live together, then we're gonna die alone.
This is not an audition. This is not
that was my Jack Shepherd. Reading.
I want to go back. I want to go back.
No, we have to go back, Blake. Get it right. Get back.
Wow.
It's never been easy.
Oh, it's beautiful. Good job.
Don't tell me what I can't do.
You are my people. We are losers on an island of misfit toys.
Meanwhile, Andy's like, how about that clown, y'all?
No, Andy's like, I'm just the everyman. You know, you guys.
I want to be a dentist.
No,
dude, don't get me started. Best movie ever.
You picked that up and ran with it. Like a red balloon. Yes, it is indispensable, the notion of community as valuable as being what helps us and aids us overcome the obstacles, both ancient and evil, and small and local. But I think the conversation, like just from 15, 20 minutes ago, that I for my own self kind of accidentally walked into, in exploring just the differences in the narrative structure and that sort of thing, are really like weighing my spirit a little bit. You know, the community notion, and this is going to sound dismissive, it is not at all meant to be, but the community notion is a very positive, noble idea and ideal and thing that we should pursue and practice. And hey, everybody, community is a great thing, and there is truth to, we should all pursue that where and when we can, and you will find great value to that. So that's kind of, there's a sort of a universality to that, but I feel like this idea that the word burdening keeps coming to me, and thinking earlier about this juxtaposition of thematic notions of how the adults can't see it. Now, maybe we should nuance that phrasing. The adults don't see it. Can they? I don't know, but they don't. And again, this is where the notion that the movie sort of does, and again, I'm not indicting the movie here, but the movie sort of presenting Pennywise as smaller than the book would, in its 1,200 pages, no doubt. Where it gets into a little bit of trouble is deflating that red balloon a bit, because I can't shake this feeling of how we burden our children with saving us and getting it right. We impose how we've gotten it wrong and expect them to just sort of fix it for us, subconsciously. I mean, it's so subconscious. Some ways it's conscious, sure, and you're a real terrible person in the world if it is conscious. But in most ways it's subconscious. But I just can't get over, at least how it's presented in the book, and hopefully more fleshed out in a follow-up chapter 2 film, is this is an ancient, carnal, depraved, dark evil that is consuming the essence of a town. And it is the children that save that town.
Yeah.
And I feel like there's something really powerful and indicting about how it calls me. I think maybe Ian, it was you earlier talking about just our jobs are stupid. You know, that's I know that's a pithy comment, but the idea has merit. Like, we make so many things important that just aren't, for not because they aren't valuable to the running and operating of our lives, but because they are not valuable to the essential components. I'll use a very strange example here. Just recently taught my kids how to ride their bikes. It was a very belated sort of exercise. But they got there. My 9-year-old had her helmet on. She had her knee pads. She had her elbow pads on. I take them up to this little church parking lot near our house. They were riding around. I'm just sort of farting around on my phone while they're riding their bikes. Well, all of a sudden I look up and she took a turn too sharp and her face bounces off the pavement. I'm watching this happen. I can't tell exactly what has happened, but I'm rushing across the parking lot. She's okay. There was no blood or anything, but she chipped a tooth. But in this moment, she is arrested by the startle and the shock. I don't know if y'all have ever had these types of experiences. If you have children or if you have loved ones, period, you probably have, where life just comes into very stark focus.
Yes.
And all of a sudden you're like, oh, wow, this phone is a piece of junk. Who cares about that car over there? You know, like, my job, it really doesn't matter. Like, oh my gosh, this person who is me, and who is us, is in pain and in peril and in harm, and especially in the case of a child, doesn't understand, can't quite comprehend the complex systems we create to sort of justify all the crap we do to each other. They don't get it. And and they're not meant to, and maybe we aren't either, but it just brings it all into narrow focus. And I'm rambling here, but the point I'm simply trying to make is how scary it is to me. And maybe the real scary, fearful, dread nature of this book and the story is we just keep perpetuating this cycle of saying, hey, you generations below us, we're going to F it up really bad for you, but y'all have fun with that. You know, maybe you'll figure out a way out of it. So I don't know. I can't kind of shake that notion.
Yeah.
I think that's a really, I agree that that's virtually there in the 2017 It film. And I would also love if that becomes something very, pungently explicated in the second installment. Because we've reiterated so many times that, splitting it into 100% 1989 and 100% 2017 is probably a necessary evil, given how the industry works, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But I want those kind of like Proustian links between past and present that almost seem to hint at a causality between the past and the present that we know can't be, or at least we think we know can't be. I want that to obtain narratively so that we see this order that unites 7 lives around the phenomenon of Pennywise, or I mean, really the phenomenon of evil, and the radical encounter with evil. That Pennywise is really like a distillation of that distracted evil of adulthood, of ignoring the barbarism of growing up, and somehow being able to cast a blind eye on it and saying that's just how it is, and just accepting the banality of evil as necessary. There's a difference between saying the admission, like, yes, the world is full of evil. Acknowledging that is one thing, and then it's another to lose awareness of it and become the adults driving past Ben getting cut up by Henry Gower and just go on, because that is, I agree with you. That's an indictment. We're them. Right. Because we're literally watching it.
Right.
We are watching Henry Gower doing that the same way those adults are. And I think that is you are the man moment.
Yeah.
We're doing the exact same thing. And I hope that is, I hope those horns are grappled with and just steered toward us all the way in the second installment. Because I guess you're right about Blake's fear of open fields. It's the existential dread. And I want some jump scares to try to get me with Pennywise, I guess. But what I really want more than anything is the admission from the film that just being alive in a world as crummy as ours, just day to day, is wearying and scary enough in and of itself. Because it might not be a wolf man or a decapitated soldier, but there's horror lurking in every angle,
right,
all the time.
Sure. And I would say too, just gosh, it's still rattling around in my brain, Nathan. Just that notion of actually got visible chills when, like, on my arm, goose flesh, when you said we burden our children with saving us. Like, the arrogance and the cognitive dissonance that happens when we misplace the reality that they are a gift that has been given to us, that we are meant to teach and train and guide. And yes, it's true. There's a certain fond benevolence that hits, that we want them to be better than us. But I think that's very different than the burden we place upon them that demands they be better, that demands that they get right what we stopped.
Did wrong.
Yeah, exactly. What we stopped caring about, and what is no longer, our problem anymore. And we can easily slide into this because we're old, and because we, not the people in this conversation necessarily, but when we grow older, we can. Like, I forget who mentioned it, but we do. Oh, it was you, Ian. We stopped caring about the importance of things, responsibility. We stopped caring about that kind of stuff. But at the same time, we kind of undermine ourselves, because we have the profound ability, if we have learned our lessons, to impart wisdom, to impart guidance, to impart structure, to impart grace. It's not the film or the book that we're talking about, but who in this conversation has read Something Wicked This Way Comes? Who's read that book?
I have.
Okay.
I have. It's been a while.
So one of the things I love about that book, and I'm going to say it in contrast to the adults in it, so that it's not too far afield, is one of the multitude of things that I love about that book. For many, many years, that was cited as my ultimate favorite book ever written by anybody. It's still second place only to A Christmas Carol, but the thing that I love so much about that book is it's one of the rare instances where the darkness is coming to the town. Everybody's being consumed by the darkness. You've got these 13-year-old boys who are witnessing it and saying, like, where in the world are we going to go? And it's one of those bizarre, rare moments where one of the boys goes and tells his father, who's in his 50s, and his father believes him. And his father begins to join the action against it. And I get chills thinking about how rare that is. How rare it is that an authoritative figure would step in and actually do something substantial to assist those who, like we talked about earlier, feel desperately alone, and feel the weight of this burden that is literally threatening to consume them. And you could go into all sorts of socio-political ideologies about, like, the whole, like, this is going to eat us alive if we don't do something about it. And there's such a just an utter dismissal on the part of so many people who should be leading the charge and imparting and passing down the blessing and passing down the impartation of wisdom, the heritage, all of those kind of things. But we're foolish. We have spent all of our oil, and the bridegroom has come, and we're done, and we're spent. And at that point, we have nothing left to give but ashes and ruin, and hope to God that the kids will make better choices of it. But I think the thing that bothers me so much is our apathy towards that condition. We can grieve that condition, and we can try, I mentioned just a second ago that my, Something Wicked This Way Comes was supplanted as my favorite book by A Christmas Carol. One of the things I love about A Christmas Carol is because at its base, it tells us that it's never quite too late to change. Scrooge is an old man when he finds his redemption. He is a very old man, and on his deathbed, literally, when he finds his redemption. And so there is hope if we can learn the lessons of that, if we can recognize, like, hey, yeah, I may be in my 50s, 60s, 70s, too tired to care, too old to care, nobody's listening anyway, but there's still an opportunity if we will just look at things a little differently and try again to join the fray with the Losers Club and not just abandon them to wander the sewers and try to seek out wander literally the filth and the stuff that's washed down from up above and try to go in there and confront that evil. If we will join that fray with them, if we will at the very least provide them support and security and stability and a safe place to speak and all of that sort of thing. I could go on for hours and hours, but I'm really passionate about this.
Yeah, I think there's few things more beautiful than to see when a child provides a form of redemption for the parent voluntarily without coercion.
Yes.
It's an act that happens within the freedom of grace and love. Like, it has to happen within that sphere. Mm-hmm. Like, it cannot be coerced. It cannot be forced. But when it does happen, and when a child does address the sin of his father, to use biblical terminology, and provides a way for their parent or the sins of the parents to be cleansed, it is beautiful. Like, that's that's the beauty of grace. Like, on a more on a community level or a systemic level, is that if we can provide the grace and the love to cover this whole situation, freedom can happen within that. And people are not concerned about their own sins in that moment. It's that focusing that you were talking about, Nathan. That focusing in that moment of, that car doesn't matter. Like, this job does not matter. Like, I'm in this moment, I'm focusing on this child that I love. Yeah. Or this parent that I love. And I am voluntarily, out of my love for this person or these people, going to do this thing that takes sacrifice. It always does. As parents, you guys know that. And so there's always a cost, and it's to yourself. But that's the gospel. That's what happens when the gospel takes place, is that it's a cost that we take upon ourselves so that someone else can be freed.
And in losing our life, we find it. Absolutely.
Exactly. Yeah. So.
Right. Yep. And I know that we can't explore this for very long. I just offered as a teaser. I want to thread forward from what you said about something wicked this way comes. We see what you were lamenting in Salem's Lot, where Mark's parents don't believe him, and Father Callahan is the only person who will put his reputation online to say, I know this sounds insane, but, like, Mark doesn't make stuff up, right? So, if Burke thinks there's something to this, and Mark is saying this, and I have no reason to go, well, that can't be, then I have to consider it, right? And Mark's parents are saying, no, that's nuts. Vampires, come on. And,
right, yeah.
And it's like you said, a lot of what we see in it is, it percolates through so much of King's work, but it's where the kid, it's the special insight of a child that gets you into the kingdom, right? That also lets you see, like, no, that is a monster there. Like, you can't see it because you're a dumb grown up, and your care is disordered and located in the wrong place. But that is a monster. Make no mistake. Mm-hmm.
And a monster of your making, a monster that you have contributed to its creation.
This monster is your fault.
Yes,
by the way.
Yes. Yeah.
I want to say that a lot, just in life, just in general.
This monster is your fault.
About so many things. Sometimes about my children, maybe. You know.
New shirt design.
That's right. Well, I'd like to do two things real quick because we probably should wind down the conversation. But we've heard so little from our resident everyman. I want to give Andy an opportunity to chime in and to say something.
Are you in the bathroom?
I'm not in the bathroom. I agree with what you guys are saying.
It says, "Don't say anymore." That was too perfect.
That was like sad Affleck. That meme that was going around. I agree.
That was Andy. I heard a microwave, like the button getting pushed.
Are you driving into a field somewhere?
I need a pot pie snap.
Well, honestly, I'm happy with that. Like, Andy, I want you to have the chance, but I think that was such a pitch perfect. I agree with what y'all are saying. Like, that's the highlight reel right there. That is so perfect. But sincerely, so the next thing I wanted to do, if nobody else has anything burning in their heart to say, and if they do, please speak up because we would
my
love
heart
it.
burns there too.
It's actually really more in my loins. Just so you know.
Ooh, nice. This is
what's so funny about this moment is I think Reed's actually, rightfully so, building to something serious. And our dynamic is, I know during late in the podcast recording to back off the jokes because, you know, rightfully so, there's a little bit of reverence invoked, and we've been talking about heavy thematic things, but y'all don't know our dynamic, and y'all just keep throwing them out there. And I'm like, yeah, go for it.
It's awesome.
Reed's getting pissed off. He's like, these dudes, we're never doing this crossover again.
I am not getting pissed off.
I'm kidding.
Blake's no dummy. He knows cues. He's just a nihilist. So.
I just love it when Blake brings up his loins. It just...
Now, see, that's a quality offering, Andy. Thank you for coming in on that.
No, so
the ritual can commence.
Oh. I know my role in this. I'm out, y'all. I'm out.
Wait, that's gray water.
Wow. Reed, please stop it all.
so just
I guess I'll go first.
Oh Lord. Oh my goodness.
Buy me dinner first. Good Lord. Okay, so I know you've got a microwave. Like, make it useful.
In my defense of the microwave, my wife was making hot chocolate.
I knew it.
It's hysterical.
And you just record next to the microwave.
Good luck going serious from this point on.
So no. In all seriousness, like, you know, we're the only two things I have left to do is I always like to bring in at least one substantive scripture reference to tie all this back together, and I have one that I think applies to really everything that we've been saying. Ecclesiastes chapter 4 and verse 12 simply says, "Though one may be overpowered, two can defend themselves, and a cord of 3 strands is not quickly broken." There is evil, there is darkness in the world, there are plenty of things that can be frightening and scary and overpowering, but in community, both backwards and forwards, both in recognition of how we got here and in hope for what can commence from community, that darkness can be overcome, that evil can be overpowered, the circumstances can be endured, and so that was the first of two things that I wanted to do was just sort of bring in the scripture reference to drive it home. I'll take a brief moment to see if anybody has any responses to that. And there we go. And now I think it's time for you guys to meet mine and Nathan's best friend, our beloved. Every episode where we talk about a movie, our beloved. Hanks. Yes, our beloved David S. Pumpkins is in the room, you know. So as you guys, if you don't know what I'm talking about, because trust me, if you've never listened to our show, A, I'm not offended, but B, this is going to take some explanation.
But B, I hate you.
But listen, we're fine.
Only got 15 minutes in.
But we rate every film that we watch by by a metric of number of David S. Pumpkins. So that's obviously the Tom Hanks SNL character. So how we do this, each of you I'm gonna give you a moment to think about it. I'll start with Nathan, and then we'll go around. I'll do the math for us, even though I hate math. But what you're gonna do is you're gonna think about a rating of 1 to 5, or 0 to 5 if you really hated something, up to 5 in the area of style, which is just how did you find the approach to the story? How did you like it? All that thing. Just whatever style means to you. In the area of style, in the area of scares, how scary is it? Its fright factor. And in the area of substance, how much was there in it to think about and talk about when you left the theater? So think of a 0 to 5 rating for each of those categories. We're going to go around the table in each of those categories to discuss it, and then we'll spit out a metric, an official number of David S. Pumpkins. So Nathan, I'm going to start with you. What would you give the 2017 film directed by Andy Muschietti? Am I saying it right? Muschietti? Okay, so
Muschietti?
Muschietti? Spaghetti?
Spaghetti?
Machete?
Are those worms? Spaghetti?
And also for those of you who have never participated in the David Pumpkins scoring, you can do halvesies. So
you can.
In case,
yes.
Can we do quarters?
What about 0.75?
Yes,
I mean,
exactly.
Don't get crazy.
But what would you do style?
For me on style for David Spaghetti's It. I really think they did about as strong a job. There's a few kind of scripting elements, sort of how the story might have been done perhaps a little better, but in terms of the production quality, in terms of the satisfaction of coming out of Dark Tower and holding your breath for a Stephen King feature adaptation, I thought they really nailed a lot of it. And so I'm going to give it a 4 out of 5 David S. Pumpkins for style. I think they really got a lot right, far more than they maybe could have, and definitely far more than I was worried they would. So yeah.
Awesome. Awesome. Okay, Ian, I'm going to go to you next for style. What would you give it out of 5 for style?
Most of today, I thought that I would give it a 3, but I think that they captured 1989 while giving us some structural links with like the 60s, like the original source material. I think that they evoked it well, and like we discussed, gave us some believable, solid characterization, and just the fact that "Dear God" by XTC and 6 Different Ways by The Cure were in the soundtrack, I have to give it 3.5.
All right. Fair enough. Blake, what would you give it for style?
So style, I would have probably gone with a 4 out of 5 like Nathan, except I really feel that some of the CGI is really dodgy.
Okay.
Yeah.
And so that really bugged me when it went wrong. Like when they got it right, it was really good. Like it was really well done. But because it was so really well done in those moments, the dodgy parts were like,
yeah,
kind of missed it on that one. So
what were they like, Blake? Okay, thank you.
So I'm gonna give it a 3.5, like Ian.
All right, that's wonderful. Now, Andy, same question for style. What would you give it out of 5 for style?
I think it captured a lot of stuff pretty well, if I'm honest. I give it about a 4.5.
All right.
On style.
That's nice. That's very nice.
So I'm going to say I was very, very pleased.
Awesome.
Andy is always the most gracious when it comes to these films.
Incredibly.
So
I just want everyone to win.
So I'm kind of in the same ballpark as all you guys. I'm going to land with Nathan. I give it a 4 out of 5. I don't think it was necessarily perfect, but I think it was about as strong as we could have hoped for what they were trying to do. So so I'm going to land at a 4 for style. So now in the area of scares, I'm going to mix the order up a little bit, and I'm going to start with you, Blake, for scares. What would you give it out of 5 for its fright factor?
So as an avid listener of The Fear of God, I've always found myself in this situation whenever y'all go through these. Because
it's tougher than it looks, isn't it?
Scares for me, it's always either it's like 0 or 5.
All contingent on whether there was a field in the dark. You know,
exactly. But I feel like there were some of the jump scares were well done, and I feel horrible to give it to a complete 0. So I'm gonna go with a 1.5.
All right, 1.5 for scares. That's a bold choice.
No shame.
That's
Very gracious.
bold choice right
That's my
there.
favorite.
So now I'm going to bounce over to Nathan. Nathan, what would you give it for scares?
I'm gonna say what it is, a 3. I think that, purely on the notion of the jump scares, I think the jump scares themselves are good, and several of them are really effective. And I do think most of Neibolt House and the sink scene kind of tilted a little bit towards where I would have liked it to go. I do think there was probably a lot more that they could have done, but to me it was kind of a 3 in terms of scares. Nothing dreadful, but definitely had something to it.
Sure. I'm in a similar boat with you. I'm going to give it a 3.5 for scares for some of the reasons that we've mentioned already. I feel like it was a little too dependent on the jumps, but plenty of those jumps were quite effective.
Sure.
So, Andy, I'm going to go to you. What about for scares? What would you rate it for scares?
I'm going to go with 3.5. But I think for me, the scare stuck with me. Jump scares don't bother me as much as, some guys do with not needing it. Sometimes I think it just adds to the story and I like them.
Sure.
But I give it 3.5.
All right, sweet. Ian, where are you at with scares?
I'm going to give it a 3, and I'm gauging that from audience response. Because I'm kind of with Blake, where generally speaking, as much as I like horror films, they don't frighten me. So in a way, I'm kind of grading it on, were they stupid attempts to scare? And from audience reaction, it seemed effective for a lot of people. I don't think there were too many I think there were too many jump scares, but it wasn't just a deplorable, saturated mess of it.
Right.
And I did experience dread, knowing what was going to happen to Georgie. And I thought that the slideshow was very nicely evocative. I don't know, almost like I had this kind of vampire-like feeling watching that in a way. And points for that effort. So I'll go higher than middle of the road and say 3.
Okay. All right. Perfect. I'll lead the way on substance, and I'll say I really struggled with this one because so much of what I want to infuse in it is actually what I got from the book and not necessarily what's present in this film.
Yeah.
But I think if I'm being fair to the film, and sort of divorcing that from my experience of the book, I'm gonna land on a 3 for substance. So that was my vote for substance. I do think there's a lot there, but it feels kind of by necessity of their decision to split it, it feels kind of incomplete. So I feel like a lot of those payoffs we're going to get once the story is whole. So I landed on a 3. I'm going to go next to back to Andy. Andy, what do you think for substance?
Substance, 4.5.
All right.
I thought it was very good. I liked the characters. I thought it stuck with me, and I give it. It's one of the better movies I've seen this summer. I also saw The Dark Tower, and
I'm sorry,
coming into another Stephen King adaptation, was a little hesitant, but substance-wise, 4.5.
Awesome, nice. Ian, I'm going to bounce over to you. What would you give it for substance?
I'm going to give it a 3. For many of the same reasons that you did. But I feel like what keeps it from going like 2.5 is that I think that the grief is captured well and it is palpable. And I like that it's set in contrast with this kind of anonymous and vanishing adulthood in the final quarter of the film, and having the payoff of finding Georgie's coat and seeing Bill's grief. It's not that I enjoy seeing a teenage child deeply missing his deceased brother, but it just it captured that feeling well, and I think that did contribute to something that stays with you and is worth talking about.
Sure. I understand. I can resonate with that. Blake, how about you for substance?
So I'm probably gonna toe the line to some extent. I'm gonna go with a 3 as well. Okay. And it, like you, it's really hard to break apart the film from the book.
Right.
And that's the case with the old film as well.
Mm-hmm.
I think there's enough implied elements from the book that were begun in this film that it wasn't inconceivable for you to draw those elements out.
Sure.
And so I think while they're not fully fleshed out, like hopefully they will be in the next film, I think there's enough there that you can kind of grab onto and you can kind of go from there. But because it's still kind of seedlings of those ideas, it doesn't quite hit the 4 and above level. So I'm gonna go with a 3.
All right, fair enough. Okay, Nathan, you're going to bring us home right now. So you tell us what your substance rating is, and I will tell us what our David S. Pumpkins rating is.
Sure thing. I will echo a lot of what's been said and go with a 3. And honestly, this is going to sound mean, but that feels a little generous at the moment. I think what probably all of us are feeling is there's more to the story, and so presuming they get the follow-up sort of right, it could tilt my substance for this to the 4 or higher, but if they don't land that plane well, it could tilt it towards, lower. So it's a held breath kind of 3. It's like, okay, I am bringing a lot of my thoughts on the book into the movie, in terms of that substance factor. And so based on what I'm seeing, it's possible they will get there, but it's hard to know for certain. So for now.
All right. And guys, thank you so much for participating in that. This was the broadest possible David S. Pumpkins rating that we could have had. But I think we've landed in a pretty fair place. I think everybody's going to be happy with this. We officially, in the first hopefully of many, The Body, the Blood, The Fear of God crossovers, we officially give Andy Muschietti's It 6.5 out of 10 David S. Pumpkins.
All right.
We did it.
We did it.
We got the spaghetti.
Wow.
So as we say on every single episode, the fear of God is the beginning of wisdom, but it's not the end of the conversation. Our listeners have heard by now all of the multitude of places that they can reach out to us, fearofgodpodcast@gmail.com, our Twitter handles, etc. So I want to use our social media cues and opportunity for you guys to share yours for us, and then we'll remind everybody of ours, and I'll land the plane. So where can they find people of The Body, the Blood?
Well, you can find me at Blake I. Collier on Twitter and Facebook, and my website is blakeicollier.com. I have an ego, guys.
I was going to say.
We're all on a podcast right now, Blake.
Yes,
we all have a bit of an ego.
Yeah. And so, and you can find The Body, the Blood at The Body, the Blood on Twitter.
Nice.
And would you like to talk about how you don't have a presence?
You can't find me on the internet because I'm a Luddite. So it's been nice.
Or are you really the wisest among us all?
I was going to say, that's probably a very respectable position.
Yeah.
Oh, it is. It is.
Because I don't care about adult crap.
Yeah.
What about you, Andy?
I don't have a phone to drop.
You can find me. My Twitter handle is Hilabofus. That's HILIBOFAS. I have a website, www.hilabofus.com. And if you want to find me on Facebook, it's Andy Hilabofus Whitfield.
Now hold on, Andrew. Tell them about Margaret sleeping.
Oh, I also have a wonderful website where I take pictures of my wife sleeping.
Yeah, it's really weird.
And if you look in Instagram, you can use the hashtag Margaret Sleeping.
You don't want to.
You can see it. And you can check her sleeping at margaretsleeping.com.
Yeah, just don't do it.
That is amazing. I'm going through it right now. Oh, Lord.
That is so awesome. Well, and as listeners know, you can find us, of course, at The Fear of God on Twitter. Nathan, where can they find you on Twitter besides The Fear of God?
Sorry, I'm looking at.
Oh, no.
Wow, you Snapchatted a dog face onto her. That's hilarious. This is amazing. I'm sorry. What was your question, Reed? They can find me. They can find me at the Nathan Rouse.
And you can also find me on Twitter at Reed Lackey. You can comment on this post or any of our other episodes at morethanonelesson.com. We would just love to hear from each and every one of you. Guys, this has been incredibly exciting for us. So I hope you guys have enjoyed it. I hope you guys have had as much fun as we have.
Yes.
So hopefully this is a very special quarterly king. This is our second quarterly king. So we needed a real big send-off for this one. So Body the Blood, thank you so much for reaching out to us to cross over, and this has been a real blast. And we hope it's the first of many. I think they can stay tuned if they're listening to this feed through the Body the Blood. They can stay tuned for more conversation. This is where the fear of God will leave it for now. Guys, thank you just so much again for your time and for sharing your thoughts with us on it and for being just good friends. This is nice.
Yes.
You'll float too.
And we'll check out social media to find out where we're going next week, because hashtag I Love the 90s, guys, is coming. So hashtag I Love the 90s starts next week. The first entry in that just phenomenal series we've been building to for 4 or 5 months right now will start next week, and we will see you guys then. Body Blood, thanks again. We appreciate it.
Thanks, guys.
All right. Thank you.
Bye.